Okay, so we'll get started as people are still flowing into the webinar, and this is the 57th Security Thought Leadership webinar. And it's a special one today in the sense that it's another one of our series on a special part of the world. So those of you with us last week will know we had security in Asia on Tuesday morning, and on Thursday morning security in the Nordics, Scandinavia. Today it's security in the Benelux. And it's special also because it's the build up to the ASMC Congress and the first Benelux OSPAs. And a bit more about that later in the broadcast. But these are the associations across the Benelux that are active supporters of the commitment to identify those who are really outstanding in security and to recognise them. So we're very grateful to all those associations for their proactive support of that initiatives. And the topic today, the implications of COVID-19 on the future of security in the Benelux. What are the opportunities and the traps? And we'll be debating this with 4 expert panelists. Now, 3 of these will be very well known in the Benelux, and another one from completely outside the region, slightly unusual. This was Michel de Jon's idea. When we were planning this webinar, he thought it'd be a good idea if we could have one from outside the region. So what I'm going to do in a minute is I'm going to invite our panelists to introduce themselves. When all 4 have done that, I will then invite them to make their opening statement. And when they've all done that, their opening statement, I will invite you, the audience, to ask your questions. Can you please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your screen? And can I encourage you, please, to get your questions in early? There can be points for discussion, and I will endeavour to cover them. But we want to get through some of the big issues that are going on in security, both in the Benelux and around the world. So let's go, without further ado, invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves. And first of all, Nele. Is that, how did I do?
Very well, thank you. So I'm Nele Ekens. I'm a criminologist, and I've been working around about 20 years in security at the moment. And since almost 10 years, I work for the Belgian nuclear operator as the corporate security operations manager. It's a whole full title. But in this role, I developed the governance and the methodologies in security and risk management. But next to actually the physical security part, I'm specialized in domains such as insider threat mitigation and information security. Now, I also am in the ACES chapter Benelux, a board member, and I'm doing the secretary function at the moment. So I'm having quite some nice times with that as well. So up to you.
Thank you very much indeed. And Mark, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. My name is Mark Kools, and it's always a pleasure to introduce myself after one of my former students. So welcome, Nele, to be in the same panel. So I started my career at Alcatel, a French telecom company in the security department. I switched to one moment in my life to the justice department. And since 2003, I'm a full professor in criminology at Ghent University, but as well still teaching one course at the Free University of Brussels. And my main topics are private security and intelligence studies.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. And Werner, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Werner Korman, and I'm the Chief Security Officer of Solvay, which is a chemical group specialized in specialty chemicals. I've been in this role for 4.5 years now. Prior to this role, I had several other roles in security with incremental responsibility on an international level. And prior to joining the private industry, I was an officer in the Belgian military army, where I had a career of 20 years. So that's quite a lengthy way behind me. I'm also an active volunteer for ASIS International, where I'm currently the chairman of the Professional Standards Board, which is a very important pillar of our profession, actually, having good and effective and efficient standards in place. That's me in a nutshell.
Thank you very much indeed, Werner. And most of this audience won't know our 4th panelist, in the sense that he's outside the region, but he's very well known to me and he's very well known in this country. Rajiv, introduce yourself, please.
Thank you, Martin, and good morning and good afternoon to all. It's afternoon in India. I'm the odd man out here today, and I come from India, as Martin said. I am the CEO of a company called V4 Security Service in India, and also I'm being honored to be a part on OSPA's as the regional advisor for Asia. I spent about 30 years in this line, dealing with homeland security, private man guarding companies, security technology, emergency response, and of course now cyber and forensic security. Also associated with many associations and organizations doing voluntary work in India on security, especially. And thank you again, Martin, for having me here today.
Thank you very much indeed, Rajiv. Okay, that's our panel once again, and people write to me from all over the world and say how good we are at getting elite panels, and I hope you agree, another one here. So let's go to our opening statement. This is where we give each of our panelists 3 minutes for them to offer their views on this topic. And so I'll go back to Nile. Nile, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Martin. I think this crisis is actually a very big, different crisis than the crisis we've had in Belgium, in particular in 2016-15, when we had our terrorist attacks. Because that was really a security crisis, and we've been very shaken up with it. If you compare it now, the Corona crisis is really a health crisis, and we see more that because it's a health crisis, security is more a steady factor, a reliable factor for the companies. Saying that, we see that a lot of security managers who have in their DNA being a very good crisis manager as well, because if you're in the security business and you cannot handle a crisis in a good way, I think you're not in the right position. So having this crisis going on, we see that a lot of security managers, a lot of colleagues of mine are actually stepping into as a crisis manager role, and sometimes even taking over the part of the health and safety. Which is actually a bit bizarre, but it means that we are seen as a steady factor, and our competences as a leader are being recognized in many companies. But it is also a flip side of it, I think, because of course the focus is maybe taken away from our security part, and we do have a lot of challenges that are coming up and that are already present. I mean, talking about cybersecurity, definitely also insider threats, because a lot of companies are having a very, very difficult times in revenue and layoff, etc. And the insider threat is going to increase a lot. So it is really something that we have to keep in mind.
Thank you very much indeed. That was very helpful and concise. I hadn't heard some of that before, actually. Interesting. Mark, your opening statement, please.
Okay, thank you, Martin. And I will relate especially to what is happening on the level of policies. And when we discuss on Benelux, one of the major issues that we can see is that the policy is not the same in Belgium as it is in the Netherlands, as it is in Luxembourg. So it's often difficult to talk on a Benelux policy as such. But just as Nele, and to refer to Belgium, I think on the policy level, Belgium as such, from the governmental or the business communities, we didn't foresee the pandemic, but I think no one foresaw it. But the federal government in Belgium really took action very fast, and severe action by going into a lockdown. So we had a severe lockdown, but we can come to it when we have questions. One of the difficulties or the opportunities or perhaps the traps in Belgium is related to the government structure. It's always a multi-level approach. It's the federal government, it's the communities or the regions, it's the cities, provinces, and so on. So dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, on the policy level, it was new. Police, public policing, they need to police it. It was the same for the private security industry. On the level of policing, to be very brief, they do not go, or they didn't went that much into criminal law, but they worked especially with administrative sanctions based on one of our legislations, namely the 2007 Civil Security Act. So also for public policing, it was a new situation. On the other side, when we looked to the private security or the private business security community, we had an opportunity in 2017 when Belgian Parliament voted a new law, which is coined the law Jambon, and the family name of the former Minister of Interior and Security, which gave a lot of opportunities to the private security companies. But due to the impact of COVID, I think today we cannot say there are a lot of changes. What we saw was a drop in aviation security, a drop in event security. But on the other hand, there was a race in shopping security and so on. So to summarize, it was especially a policy-driven reaction towards the pandemic, with special tasks for the public security environment and for the private security environment. So that's my initial statement.
Thanks very much indeed, Mark, and I agree. I think it's one of the interesting points to come back to some of the difference in policies between countries, and we'll do that, I'm sure, in the discussion. Thank you, Mark, and over to Werner. Werner, your opening statement, please.
Yes, thanks, Martin. I think if there's one thing that we can say with respect to the COVID crisis, whether it's in the Benelux or globally, it's that it's one of these typical Black Swan events that, you know something's going to happen, but you don't know what, when, or where. And this requires a rethinking of how we traditionally deal with these kind of events. And it can be from any perspective. It doesn't necessarily have to relate to security alone. Although in this case, and I agree with the comments that Nele and Mark made, security was often in the lead. On one hand, there was an element of policing that was included and still is to a high degree. And so this really put in a lot of companies, at least security leaders, on the forefront, leading the crisis management teams of their organizations, navigating them through this constant evolution. And with a lot of difficulties, to be honest. I mean, most of the people could relate probably to people saying, it's just a small flu. And even today, some do, right? Whereas today, where we're standing for an unprecedented, well, at least in our time, an unprecedented sanitary crisis. The second element is that this was also a crisis that spilled over from the sanitary level to the economic level and impact. And again, there, in some companies, security leaders could play a role. Why? Because you always know there's something next. And in this case, this meant two key lines of reflection. One is, how are we going to get out of the sanitary impact of this crisis? How are we going to deconfine? How are we going to bring our people back, open our offices, our plans, and whatever? And secondly, how will the world look like after the crisis, if there is an after the crisis at all? And so how can we bring our business back to the normal levels or better? And so starting that reflection within the company was also something that was driven by many of my colleagues that I know of. So it's been challenging but interesting. We've discovered new ways of working. We've discovered new approaches, but we've definitely set the tone in our companies. And yeah, I don't think we wasted a good crisis.
Thank you very much indeed. Just to say to the audience, if you'd like to get your questions in as soon as you can, using the question answer button at the bottom of your screen, we'll come to them after we've heard from our fourth panelist. So there's the view from the Benelux. Let's get a different view about this crisis and the response from a different part of the world, in India. Rajiv, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, Mark. You know, as every other country in the world, India also got caught by this situation unaware. However, we were, it started in our neighborhood, but still it came to India through Europe, through Italy, actually. We were knowing that it is coming, we were knowing that it is coming, but still we could not, we could not prepare well because of the following reasons. One, that India, I'm sure you all know, is a very, very vast country and has a huge population, number 2 in the world. Suddenly, it came in, and we were thinking that it would die down. We had the apprehension that since the temperature in India is, it's a warm country as compared to the other countries in Europe and in China, it should die down. It should not affect here so much. But we just got caught unattended. So what happened when it came here? We also, we thought that we are delaying it, but what went perhaps a little wrong here, that we just brought the country under lockdown overnight. So where the people were stranded wherever they were, India being a vast country, a lot of people migrate from their hometown, their cities to another cities, to metro cities, to larger cities to work. And then suddenly there was a chaos. And that people there was no job, they had nothing to do, they were left with no money, and suddenly there was a situation. So we had to open up. We had to allow people to go back to their respective hometowns, to their respective cities. Just to give you a perspective, each state in India has some of them have population much larger to many countries in the world together. If you compare, larger states in India have population more than, to give an example, more than Belgium, more than Luxembourg, and more than even Netherlands. So people were rushing to go back home. They wanted to reach to their hometowns, etc. And this further increased the rate of infection across the people and such. And then we had a spread all across the country. Today we stand on, I think, 6.14 million cases, which is number 2 in the world after the US. And another problem that we have, that the larger part of our countries is rural areas. So the number of tests that we've been able to do per million is perhaps too less, and we are not able to do a lot of testing as on today. But that's about the COVID situation. But here, security again became a prime action, a prime activity in any of the commercial business, in any of the organization, where suddenly a lot of things security had to do, which is much beyond what they were supposed to be doing earlier. And it has suddenly got an importance. The last thing that I want to also say in the opening remarks, that the Mark talked about the policies. You would be surprised that, of course, we have a central policy across the country, but since every state has a different condition, we still have different policies to address, of course, a COVID situation. We still have different policies in each state. For example, if you're traveling from one state to another state, the policy changes. You can go in a state without a quarantine situation, but you cannot come back to your own state in the same situation. So this is just the opening remarks. Maybe later we can answer more questions if they have. Thank you, Martin.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's get started with some questions then. And don't forget, if you've got a question answer button at the bottom of your screen. I'm going to ask this of the panelists. I'm going to come to you, Werner. Werner, this is a thought leadership webinar. Here we debate and we critique what's going on in order we get a better type of security in the future. And Werner, let me put this to you, that what we tend to do on these is play up the good things that security has done, for obviously very good reasons. But I wonder, Werner, whether there's a reality here that outside a small elite, the truth of the matter is what you called a Black Swan event actually reflects the fact the security world wasn't on the ball. It wasn't looking ahead, it wasn't being diligent, and it was caught unaware. Even where, and one of the points about these webinars, there have been business continuity plans, they weren't fit for purpose because they weren't prepared for such a long crisis. Is there a danger here, Werner, that outside that elite of good practice, that we might actually see the security world being seen for not living up to being able to predict what was happening and being well prepared for it? Werner.
I'd moderate that, Martin. I don't think so, to be honest, because nobody else did either. I think where security fell in was the natural tendency for a structured approach and very well thought through, pragmatic set of recommendations and guidelines for a company to deal with it. However, I think it's going to be adamant going forward that security leaders, at least, keep an open mind and focus more on resilience than just pure protection against malicious activity. If you look at how companies are organized today, very lean and mean for most, and probably even leaner and meaner after the crisis for sure, which means that you have to step up and be ready to step up and get outside of your comfort zone and outside of your box, actually, which means that it doesn't really matter what the topic is. Some of the principles to manage the topic will always remain the same. So you have to master those principles, be ready to recognize what's going on, and quickly step in and do your part. And if not, take the lead. It's a bit of lead, follow, or get out of my way. This is going to be the mindset going forward. That's going to be required from security professionals with respect to these kind of crises. And remember, we've had COVID-19 now. Maybe we'll get COVID-20 or another spate of terrorist attacks going more into instead of the explosives use of other means, cyber. There's a whole plenitude of enterprise risks that can appear on the radar screen, and so that radar screen is really our first area of focus going forward as well, making sure that it's large enough to capture these kind of black swans as soon as they occur as well. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Van. Fair enough. I mean, let me come to Nele here and build on the same question. As you said, Nele, you started off by saying there are different types of crisis. And I wonder whether you feel that around the world, your peer group have been well equipped to deal with this. And in two ways, perhaps building on what Werner says, there's the security skill set and the dealing with crisis. And as you pointed out, there's a skill set to dealing with a crisis. But there's also a skill set in being recognized as a performer within the business environment, as being a skilled leader, not just in security. And do you think that beyond that elite, which of course obviously has, that broadly speaking, security has delivered?
I believe security has delivered, but I think it's because it was not, it's maybe not the right choice of words, but it wasn't our crisis. It was a health crisis. And I think that's the major difference between other crises that are pure security crises. In that sense, identifying these critical processes, and that's a little bit what also Werner is saying, the resilience part is something that we are trying also to work upon, because you're in a way always a step back. There is always something that you haven't covered completely, and it's only by being creative in the moment that the crisis is coming up that you will actually get on and deal with it. And I think that's one of the good things that security people can do, and that is immediately step up and immediately think, okay, what's next, what can I do, and have this pragmatic approach. And that is very helpful when you're in a crisis. And also the fact that it was not really our crisis has helped us to be one step more like a helicopter view, if you can say it. So it has helped us, I believe, and especially the security professionals to step in and really work as a leader in these in this crisis.
Nele, thank you very much indeed. Mark, let me come to you, because you've spoken a bit about the very different sort of policies of the different regions. And I wonder whether now reflecting on this, Mark, and you've got a foot in both the world of business and the world of academia. I wonder whether your thought is that at the end of this, security is going to come out better off as a basis of its performance during the crisis. Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. And when we're dealing with the crisis as such and into academia, but also in the business community, also on the public level, we were always dealing with threats we know: terrorism, espionage, organized crime, as Nele said, as Werner said. But today we are confronted with a black swan, and I think the position Werner took on it is quite good. But nevertheless, and I refer to the conferences I attended and the discussions that ASIS, for example, but also EXA, the European Corporate Security Association, once put pandemia on the agenda, and everyone was looking, wow, will it come to us? Isn't it far away? Isn't it in Asia or in Africa, and so on? So I think what we have learned, and all of us introduced it, this sanitary crisis is a new security topic. Okay, the second point I want to make, and Martin referred to it, leadership. And when we deal with leadership, it also deals with communication. And if we make a comparison between Belgium, for example, and the Netherlands, I think on the public level, the communication in the Netherlands, on the policy level, on the political level, was quite good. The Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, he said, it's A, B, C. This was not the case in Belgium. Most Belgian participants or panelists, yeah, it was always something in between. And I don't think there was a good communication on the policy level in Belgium in comparison to the Netherlands. On the other side, the business community, they tried to communicate because they were confronted with all the measures of the lockdown. And then I saw that the business community reacted very fast. As Werner said, how do we need to bring in people again? Which are the new ways of working? The third level of communication, the European Union as an institution for me, and I have the opportunity to be in academia, so I have a certain freedom of speech. It was too late and too little that the European Union as such came into action. So what would be the challenge? Would security be better off after the COVID crisis? I think so, because the business community now learned, in my opinion, that they cannot always rely on public policies, on public institutions, and that they have to develop new security strategies in order to cope with this kind of crises. So I'm always an optimist. So I think security, public and private, will be better off after the crisis.
Mark, thank you very much indeed. Rajiv, would you call yourself an optimist about how security will be perceived in India post-crisis, given its performance during the crisis, or not?
Martin, this is a very, very wonderful question, and I was really willing that you would ask me this. So India has a different perspective about security before COVID, you know. Just to, as I said in the opening statement, India is all about large numbers, whether it is area, whether it is population. Similarly, India is largely dominated or served by private security agencies in terms of the manned guarding services. Just to give you an idea, there are about 9 million people in India who work as security guards. Having said that, so when this crisis happened, suddenly the role of security was enhanced and became so large to support the main businesses, the main core functions of any business, that it has gained a lot of respect. The security is now a respected profession in India, which has now suddenly found a place. The CSO is now the new chief advisor in the boardroom in India. So anything and everything that is happening, the CSO or the security head is definitely being involved, because what security has done as a logistic, function, as a IT security function, they have performed extremely well. Another aspect, as I mentioned just now, that before COVID, India was largely, the security service was largely manpower oriented, but now things have changed. Now it is more technology oriented. Now it's more equipment system oriented people. The organization, the businesses are more getting towards the technology application. Hence, there is a skill set also required. There is a development in the skill of the brand guarding security is also required. There is integration, there is an amalgamation, there is a combination, there is something, a new technology, this new word which is coming up in India. So the companies, the businesses are asking from the existing security companies to provide them man-tech solutions. They're not largely depending on the manpower guarding only. So to answer your question, Martin, yes, the security has gained a lot of respect. The security has gained a very well dignified, respected place in the boardroom these days, and it is involved in everything that a business is doing. I'm sure going forward, it will play a larger role because it's now more IT, it's more of cyber, it's more of information security, which is more important as the businesses have gone out from one place to 5,000, 10,000 places. The information, the data is not only in the server, in the locked room in an organization, but it is in a laptop, in a Wi-Fi of 10,000 people working across the country. So security has a much more important role to play in times to come.
Okay, thank you, Rajiv. Let me come back to Werner. Werner, Richard Franken's got a question, and it goes something like this. Do you think that the business of security will grow post-pandemic? And I want to put a context here, that during a crisis, it's not unusual to see security shine. We shouldn't be surprised, really, because it's its moment in time. But what we do know from history is just as security shines when there's a crisis, or should do, so when an economic recession comes back, then we know that the economic recession causes a lapse in security. We tend to get disinvestment. Do you think that, from your point of view, that post-crisis we're going to see an expansion, or are we going to see a contraction back to the norm? Werner, this is from Richard Franken.
Right. Personally, I think it's going to be a contraction in the first phase. And why am I thinking that? Because of the fact that this was a sanitary crisis followed by an economic crisis, which meant that there was not an immediate set of classic threats requiring companies to invest or spend more on security. There was, let's say, an initial spike because there was a need for people to do temperature checks at the entrance, make sure that visitors were kept at bay, or could engage with somebody at the entrance in self-declaration, where you've been, where you come from, how you're feeling before you enter the site, and the same applies to a lot of employees. So on a temporary basis, at least as far as, let's say, people resources is concerned, that spike can be explained. The next step, however, and you already see that, and we've seen it all over the news, massive layoffs in aviation, automobile, large corporations restructuring, people are losing their jobs. And, security is not going to be different here. What I do think, though, is that we have to make a distinction between the different areas of security. I think, first and foremost, capital expenditure for security projects is likely to be significantly impacted, if not frozen. One. Two, there will be a cost reduction in security operational expenditure for man guarding and similar. That's my personal expectation there. But three, there will be at least an on par, if not higher spend for cybersecurity, because that's something also that we learned from the crisis. More people working from home, more cyber challenges, as those people might be working in a less controlled perimeter than they were before when they were working at the office or in the plant or whatever their work site was. So I think security is a business area. We've got businesses earning their keep by performing security duties. In that way, they're not different from any other service company. Usually in large crises, service companies are the first ones to take the hit, since let's say their paymasters, the customers to whom they provide the service, have to start scratching to reduce the costs, and they will first do it by reducing external spend.
Werner, thank you very much. Just a very quick follow-up though, Werner, just a very quick. But if there's a reduction in expenditure and instead it's shifted, whatever's left is shifted to cyber, isn't that a move away from the skill sets of most corporate security professionals, CSOs at least?
Well, if they're really CSOs, I would say no. I mean, I can't be immediately focusing on one particular area. My problem is the enterprise security risk, whatever it comes from, and in whatever asset category it might display itself. So that ranges from, you know, almost petty crime across organized crime, terrorism, and over into the cyber realm, depending on what the nature of your business is, of course. Otherwise, yeah, I think that is, again, also what I meant with we have to keep that open mind and that open radar screen. The days of looking at just physical security or just looking at fraud or just looking at cyber should be over. And if there's anything that we can learn from that crisis purely professionally as a security management professional, it's that.
Okay, thank you, Werner. We're going to come back to this in a future webinar. We're looking at whether enterprise security risk management is a concept that's still wanting, but we'll come back to that on the future. Thank you very much indeed for that. Let me come to Belgium. Nile first. Same question for you about Belgium. Do you see that security will expand afterwards, or is it going to be back in its box? Because it strikes me as quite an important one to understand if we're going to say it's good for security. You know, not necessarily if we're going to be diluted and cut back. Nile, then Mark after that. Nile first.
I do believe that indeed security is not going to expand. A little bit like what Werner is saying. Not really say something else, to be honest, but anything that will be investments, it's related immediately and directly to whatever the company is doing. If it's not doing well, then we are not going to have the investments that we need. And especially because, as such, this is indeed a sanitary crisis. It's not like a new terrorist attack that came and that we have to put different measures on it. But it's all about indeed helping the company in looking at what is the risk appetite that the company still has. Because of course, if as a company you're being in a difficult time and on top of that you get other risks, other problems, then it will get even worse for you to recover from this crisis. So I think it's key for us as security professionals to stay on top of things, but it will be very difficult because indeed the economical reality is going to push us in our box. I think
okay.
that's what we can expect.
Okay, I'm going to come to Mark. Mark, just a few comments from you on this, if you wouldn't mind, please.
Okay, thank you. I think there will be a shift, as it has always been in the security profession. Initially, security professionals, they were dealing with crime, with petty crime, with the classical crimes like theft, pilferage, fraud, and so on. Afterwards, we moved more to risks. How can we conquer? How can we prevent? How can we detect risks? Afterwards, there was a shift to threats, and I think this is still the issue today. But in the threats, we need to include those sanitary issues, those health issues. So I think next to more impact of cybersecurity, of course, because the world is changing even more, but I think security professionals also need to take into consideration this kind of crises related to health. And perhaps it's an idea to get rid of the old separation between security, safety, risk, and so on, that we can come to integrated security functions within the companies.
Interesting you should say that, Mark. And one of the questions actually is about this link with health and safety. But on a previous webinar, we had a contribution from someone who was saying, wait a minute, and it's back to Nile's point earlier actually, that this is essentially a health crisis. In many organizations, it's the health professionals that have come to the forefront, not the security people. And that at the end of the day, so the argument goes, is the health people who are going to be shining, not the security people. And that it's the health people who may be taking over the security role Indeed, I'm told there was a webinar where health professionals were saying precisely that. I mean, is that a possibility too?
I think, and to have a small reaction to it, even when health people, experts and so on come into the spotlight, they also need to apply rules. And who is there to enforce the rules? And then you come back to the security departments or the corporate security officers. If not, no one will follow it, or some will follow it. So you still need, whenever you have a rule, you want to apply the rule or to comply to the rule, you need a kind of enforcement. And I think that's the role security will always have in companies.
No, just very quickly, Nele, on this point, on health professionals, what's your reaction to this same point? That in fact, this crisis, as you said, is a health crisis. It's the health professionals, the health and safety people that have really had the opportunity to shine, not the security people. Can you just have a quick comment from Werner, then I'll come to Rajiv. Quick comment from Nele on this point.
I think it will really depend on the company who will be the real leader. Is it a health and safety professional who will take up the role, or is it a security person? Because I've seen both actually. And I think the combination between the two professions is extremely important. It's like the yin-yang issue. If you have too much from the one or too much from the other, it doesn't work. You need to collaborate. And if that means that you're one department, that's fine. But on the other hand, you need to take into account that security is always taking a smaller bit in this whole community. And that makes it so difficult to make sure that the security topics stay on the agenda. And that's always the risk if you put everything in one thing. So I would mostly say security takes over health and safety, and then you will be sure that security will stay on the agenda and not the other way around. But yeah, I'm a bit biased maybe.
We would, wouldn't we, I guess?
Yes, of course.
Let me come to a very, very brief comment from Werner on this, because you raised the whole point, Werner, about enterprise security risk management. Of course, this is the key point. And we do in security tend to speak up security. Of course, Werner, it'd be crazy if we didn't. But there is this point, isn't there, that other professionals have got their view too. Is there a point here being made that is not that's not a trivial one? That's, be careful, security. You haven't been the main players here. Just recognise you were part of something, but it was actually a health or safety issue first, a crisis issue first, before it was a security one. Werner, very quickly, I'm going to come to Rajiv.
Well, I think, this wasn't really about the topic of security when we took it up. It was about helping the business navigate the new risk. And we didn't have to be safety experts to do that. We just had to have the right reflexes. And what would those reflexes be? If I summarize them quickly, that would be a quick capacity to grasp a risk, to analyze the situation, and to pragmatically quickly come up with recommendations that the company could follow to implement. The safety area, and I'd like to make two more comments if I may, Martin. Don't want to steal time here, but security and safety depends on where you work. Integrating the two is not always the best idea. I'll give you the example of my industry. The safety experts in chemical or in industrial safety, I mean, this is a vast area if ever you've seen one, probably over-regulated as well, but it's something that you couldn't generalize just on the principles of risk management. And if you wanted to do that, you'd still need to have a massive organization in resources to handle that. So I'm not too, let's say, too warm on that. On the other hand, with respect to what Mark said on the policing side of policies, I think also there's a couple of remarks to make in a sense that where today we need to police implementation of policies is mostly in the interaction area between companies and their clients in a B2C environment, retail, and similar types of operations. Not so much for big industrial companies, because there we largely depend on the culture of the organization to implement the policies. We don't police them as such, right? So there's also a nuance to be made there. As far as enterprise security risk management goes, for me, it's a subset of enterprise risk management. And there's different areas there. And I think this is where we all need to become skilled in. They all apply the same principles, but with a slightly different focus.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to come to Rajiv. Rajiv, I just wanted you to put this in perspective in India. It's very interesting, actually, what the other panelists were saying. I was speaking to Ben Surdin the week, who I know is in the audience today, and we hope will be a panelist in the future. And he was making the point about, how do you see security? Is it about risk mitigation? And very much along the lines you were just saying there, Werner. Rajiv, in terms of security sector in India, you've already said you think it's going to be better off as a consequence of COVID-19. Do you think that it's going to be that's going to be diminished by the inevitable economic consequences of all this, which of course are likely to particularly hit hard in countries like India?
I think I have a different opinion here. As I said, in India, and I'm sure like everywhere else, the security is changing its way it operates. It's just purely from a man guarding service industry. It is getting like an integrated service, a man tech service, where the technology and man guarding is involved. So the future is bright, absolutely in India, but the face will be different. The face will be definitely more of technology, less of guarding. On the other hand, since there is loss of jobs, there is no money with people, there's businesses are all-time low. The people don't have money, people don't have satisfaction, so the crime is increasing. In India, the crime is increasing. The moment there is a slight, we are in unlock 4 currently. So the moment India started to unlock, there were crimes. Petty crimes, cyber crimes, of course, we know there's all-time high across the globe, and India is not different. But here, the petty crimes are also increasing because people who were working on a daily wage kind of a salary, who were temporary employees, guards, a lot of guards who have gone back to their hometowns, the drivers, the factory employees, the people working in the retail, who don't have a job, who don't have enough money for their livelihood. So the crime is going to increase, and hence the security has to be more implemented, more powerful. But as I said, it will be surfaced on with a different face. It will be surfaced with a different service levels. It will surface with a different skill set level required to operate in the same environment, because it's more riskier, more planned, and it has to be more organized. I mean that is the case in India, that no, it's not going to decrease, it's going to increase. Economic crisis doesn't matter. When I also say that it will come in phase for technology currently in India, and I'm sure everywhere else, it's a lot of capital intensive proposition. But when I said it is converted into a man-tech solution, then it will be an expense that organization will show. It will be a recurring expense or on a OPEX basis that people would go in for security and then include in the expenses, and hence save the money that way, rather than doing a capex intensive investment at one point of time. But the future is bright here in India.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me go back to another question we've just got in, and I'll come to Mark first. And Mark, one of the questions that we've got is, what are the skill sets? What are the differences that we are going to see? And I perhaps this in summary form, crystallize this for me, Mark. Can I come to Nele afterwards? What are the differences we're going to see of security in Benelux, which is going to make it better than it was before? So what is it that we now know, or that security is now going to do, that makes it better? Mark first, then I'll come to Nele, then I'll come to Werner.
I think that every crisis as such is also an opportunity, and every security professional in the Benelux is learning new things. So I think the issue we should do afterward is to combine all that kind of new knowledge and to transfer that kind of knowledge. And it can be from one company to another, but it can also be, and I think there is a lot of opportunity for organizations such as ASIS, such as EXA, such as the initiatives you always take, Martin. Let's learn from each other and combine that knowledge in order to generate new skills for the future.
Yeah, okay, thank you. We had, on our 50th webinar, we had one on the role of associations about combining.
Yep.
And I came away, beforehand I was thinking what a great opportunity, and afterwards I was thinking, goodness me, that's going to be difficult. But okay, Nele, very quickly, the headline issues, what's going to be different about security afterwards?
I think the key is here, indeed, the learning curve that Mark is referring to is enormously important, but let's apply it immediately in our risk management and do it in a collaborative way with all the different departments and not only with ourselves, for instance, within security, but indeed also with our colleagues. And let's not be afraid of talking about these extreme scenarios, such as terror attack, but also the pandemic. And there are other black swans that exist and we all know about it. We don't have to go really that far, to be honest. We have examples. Let's talk about it. And there are certainly measures that we can take or that we can put in the mind and prepare for whenever it's going to happen, because some of these measures don't need to cost a lot of money, but have to be thought through before actually it happens. And they can also be used in other crises. So it's not that it's solely for one crisis or another. It's also about its resilience. It's really key in the whole business area and making sure that the activity of our company can continue in whatever situation.
Thank you. And Werner, just if you could crystallize, this is something that you've alluded to earlier, Werner. What's going to be different, headline, between before and after?
What will be different is I think that the focus on resilience is now going to have to increase. People understand now that they don't know what's behind the corner. All they know is in order to survive as a business, they have to be ready to deal with whatever it is that is there around the corner. And I think that's also the mindset that security professionals should be starting to take. And in order to be successful there, we have to sort of get outside of our own domain. It's no longer about security or safety or cybersecurity, or it's collaborative approaches within the company that we have to be ready for to quickly organize, set up, and put in motion. And that's going to be the biggest challenge and opportunity at the same time, because it means that we will have to connect more with our peers in our own company, for one, so they understand what we are about, and more than ever do we need to understand what the business is all about. And so at the end of the day, we're going to become the sort of resilience Sherpas, besides being the pure hardcore security expert, which will, I guess, always remain, as in what kind of equipment and all do you need. But Sherpas is really the term that comes to my mind most often nowadays.
Interesting. I haven't heard that before, Werner. Thank you. Werner, just a quick question on this. I understand the point you're making. Here's my question. This transition from being a security expert to being a business leader, which is effectively the transition that you're making. I get the theory. I wonder how many people around the world in that position, how many departments, are well equipped to speak the language of business, because the world of security typically hasn't been known for its understanding of profit loss, business strategy, operations. Not typically, not historically. You remain optimistic that as a sector, and I don't mean people like you, Werner, I mean much more broadly than this, as a sector, that it's well positioned to do that.
I do, because you will always hear the success stories. But I am realistic enough to realize that many of our colleagues who are, let's say, less exposed to senior management, less exposed to the business operations, less visible in their organization, less empowered to take action, may not reach that level. And there's no golden bullet, silver bullet, I'm sorry, for them to to get there. It's going to depend. It's going to take quite a bit of work, but you also have to acknowledge that you need the right circumstances for it. And so if you're not there yet, you may have missed it, but on the other hand, I'm sure there'll be a next one around the corner delivering this opportunity again.
Yeah. Okay. Let me come to each of my panel. Final comment, everyone, I'm going to come to you for, because we've run out of time. It's gone so quickly. Very briefly, Rajiv, I wonder whether you could sum up from your point of view what you see as the main opportunity for the security sector going forward. Just 10 seconds, if you wouldn't mind, 15 seconds, Rajiv. The main opportunity for the security sector post-COVID-19. I'm going to come to the rest of you. Just 15 seconds at the most, please. Rajiv.
Sure. I think I would very quickly summarize in 2 points. One is the use of the better skills for, it's an opportunity for the security professionals to learn more skills. And as I said already, that security has found a place in the boardroom. So, from security officer to a business leader, I think it's happening in India, and I'm sure it will happen across the world as well. Okay,
thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Nele. Final comment, please, if you wouldn't mind, Nele.
I would actually say increasing the collaboration with our colleagues. And I mean not only internally in our company, but also with the colleagues that we have in the other companies, because we can really learn from each other. Let's break down the walls if there are still any, and the growing leadership. I think this is also really an important one.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Mark, your final comment, please, on what you see as the big takeaway here.
Thank you. I think all of us has new knowledge, new insights, new practices, and my point is share this to the security community, and we will all be better off afterwards.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And finally, Werner, if you wouldn't mind, just 15 seconds, perhaps your final thoughts.
It's all about value, and I think if there's anything that we've been able to demonstrate in this crisis, which is still not over, is that we are equally able to deliver value as any other part of our organization.
And that would be a wonderful lesson to take away. Panel, thank you so much for your time and for your input. And thank you very much indeed for the questions and for the conversation that was going on chat. Clearly a lively issue. I have to say it's another pointer to me that not only is there a big difference around the world in the way security is reacting in this crisis, it's also, of course, within regions that it's reacting differently. Just about then, if we're thinking of outstanding performance, and that is something that is worldwide, to let you know that we've got the ASIS Security Management Congress happening on the 24th of November, and that incorporates the OSPA Thought Leadership and the awards of the first Benelux OSPAs. It's free to attend. You register there, right in the middle of your screen. And I want to just pay a special thanks to our organisations, our companies that are supporting this. As you know, it would never, ever, ever be possible to hold these events without their support. So thank you very much indeed to them. I look forward to seeing you, I hope, at that event. And just let you know that the OSPA nominations are still open. They're still open in the UK, in Romania and in Germany. We had the American OSPAs last Friday. You can go to the OSPA's website and go and see a recording of the awards ceremony. Also to note that this will be digital on the 24th of November. So it's free to attend. Come along, see a great day of insight, and a great afternoon actually of insight, debate, thought leadership, and who's going to win the Benelux OSPAs. The entries at the moment are with judges. Werner Kummerer was a judge and he returned his marks yesterday. So waiting for the entries to come in, and we'll announce the finalists, but the winners will be announced on the 24th of November. And finally to say that if you're a regular at these thought leadership webinars, you'll know we'll be back on Thursday at our normal time, when we'll be thinking about the role of regulators, what's going right and what's going wrong with security regulation. That's 3:30 British Summer Time on Thursday. So once again, thank you very much indeed to the audience worldwide for your questions. Thank you very much indeed to the panel. Some absolutely fantastic insights. What we do know, of course, from these webinars, from the OSPAs, from today's conversation, is there are great opportunities for the security sector going forward. But it does depend on its ability to rethink and to adjust. And the skill set comes of having to do that in an environment where the economic hardship is going to be very apparent. So optimism there, but still some skill and some real operational savvy needed to see it through to the next stages. More of this to come up, more debate on our future thought leadership webinars. I hope to see you on Thursday. If not, at the OSPA's Benelux award ceremony on the 24th of November online. And until then, wherever you are in the world, stay safe.